So as I said, this is a state-tribal collaboration on energy examples from Western states. We will be moving through a packed agenda and are going to leave some time for questions at the end. So next slide, please, which shows our agenda. So we'll give an introduction to the National Laboratory of the Rockies, or NLR, or I like to call this NROC. Then we will go into our presenters. So Catherine Zingg of the Ho-Chunk Nation from Tribal Energy Alternatives, Sierra Graves and Davina Whitethorn from the Diné Nation work at the California Energy Commission, and then Heidi Moore Gwenyap from Blue Lake Rancheria, and then we'll talk about some upcoming NLR and ROC events. Next slide. This is the team at NROC. I'm Carlin Corey. We also have Allison Smith, Emma Burkow, and Milana Pakes. This project is funded by the Department of Energy's Office of Policy in coordination with the DOE's Office of Indian Energy, and we are very grateful for their funding and support through this project. So first, I want to express gratitude and acknowledge that the land our main campus is on in Golden, Colorado, is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. We recognize and pay respect to the Indigenous peoples from our past, present, and future. And we are grateful to those who have been and continue to be stewards of this land. And Allison, did you want to mention any of the tribes that are on today?
In addition to the tribes represented by our speakers, we also have someone from the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe here with us.
Great, thank you. So NROC at a glance, we have a little under 4,000 workforce. We perform world-class research in energy systems integration, transportation and fuels, building and industry. And we also have partnerships with industry, academia, and government. We have 4 campuses, and we make sure that each is operating as a living laboratory where we get to test some of the technologies that we work on. Next slide, please. NROC has partnered and or supported more than 3,000 communities, tribes, jurisdictions, utilities, and businesses to help them achieve their energy goals through planning, technical assistance, capacity building, workforce development, and more. Next slide. So this project with the Department of Energy, Office of Policy, and Office of Indian Energy is designed to talk about, explore, identify best cases for state-tribal energy collaboration. So the project goals are to identify and answer key questions about tribes, tribal energy support, and tribal energy issues for the states. We identify ways for state governments and tribes to successfully collaborate on tribal self-determined energy goals. And from this, we're going to publish 6 fact sheets. We're holding 5 webinars, this is number 4, and conduct 2 in-person trainings. Those are upcoming, and we'll talk about those at the end. So here, I would like to introduce our speakers. Catherine Zingg is a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. She is the Tribal Policy Director at Tribal Energy Alternatives, where she leads state and federal regulatory strategy to advance tribal sovereignty through clean energy. Her work focuses on shaping interconnection policy, utility regulatory reform, and tribal access to renewable energy and grid resilience funding. Catherine has authored comments and regulatory recommendations across multiple dockets at the California Energy Commission, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and state utility commissions. And she supports tribal nations in navigating energy policy and program design. Catherine's work centers on expanding tribal authority in energy decision making and ensuring that state and federal energy systems uphold their responsibilities to Indian country. Next, we have Sierra Graves. She serves as the Director of Tribal Affairs and Tribal Liaison for the California Energy Commission. In this role, she works in partnership with California Native American tribes on important energy policies, including SB 100, offshore wind, wave and tidal energy, lithium, valley, and siting projects. And additionally, Sierra works to make clean energy funding available to tribes across the state for projects like microgrids, electric vehicle charging infrastructure deployment, and building decarbonization. Her work is rooted in supporting tribal energy sovereignty and building spaces for participation. Davina Whitethorn serves as the Tribal Engagement Specialist of the California Energy Commission and brings over 20 years of experience working with tribal communities. She is an enrolled member of the Navajo Diné Nation. Being born and raised on her reservation has provided her with lived experience that informs and enriches discussions on tribal issues. She earned a master's degree in legal studies from the University of Oklahoma in 2018 with a concentration in Indigenous peoples law. Her professional focus is on strengthening relationships with tribes through direct engagement, including in-person visits and meaningful consultations that ensure tribal perspectives are incorporated. And finally, we have Heidi Moore Gwenyup. She serves as the Blue Lake Rancheria's Director of Tribal and Government Affairs and leads their Sustainability and Resilience Department. She is the tribe's lead for offshore wind, including lease areas, heavy lift terminal and port, as well as is project lead for BLR's commissioning of ongoing networked behind the meter microgrid developments, which are a critical component of the Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty, or TERRAS project, that is a partnership between three tribes, the Schatz Energy and Research Center, and the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. As you can tell, these speakers bring a great wealth of information. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Catherine.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're calling in from. I just want to take some time to thank the National Lab of the Rockies, to Carlin and her team, and all the great work that's been done so far in this, what has been a multi-month process of collaboration among different folks. So I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of this. I also want to say thank you to my co-presenters here today. Thank you to the California Energy Commission, and to folks from Blue Lake Rancheria, for sharing space and, of course, adding to this conversation. And one last thank you to all the webinar participants here today who have taken some time to recognize and learn more about what good tribal state collaboration can look like. To me, when I think about tribal state collaboration, it's not just about good faith, good intentions, or good people in the right place. It's about good structures, and these good structures oftentimes come from really well-designed policy. So again, my perspective here today, I serve as the Tribal Policy Director for Tribal Energy Alternatives. I'll talk a little bit more about my organization and the different pillars of work that we have serving across all of Indian country. But I really serve as a bridge, or I track different policy innovation across different state legislatures. I interact with public utility commissions, and I track subsequently equity dockets, which I'll be really focusing my presentation on. And I translate this to tribal partners that we work with directly. And very quickly, we see how decisions made in one venue, whether it's a public utility commission, whether it's at a state legislature, ripple very, very quickly into state energy offices, into grant programs, into rebates, incentives, and mandates. And that's really where my interests these past 2 years have been focused on is trying to get ahead of the program design and make sure that tribes are very, very early brought on into not only designing equity frameworks, but taking that a step further and designing tribal sovereignty frameworks that state energy offices can take and grow and evolve into. So yeah, that is what I'll be focusing on today, breaking down the difference between equity and sovereignty. And yeah, excited. We'll go to the next slide. This is my first presentation having not the slide clicker. So I'm going to try to very, very eloquently work in next slide into my flow here. Okay, so who are we at Tribal Energy Alternatives? You might be more familiar with our parent organization, Grid Alternatives. Grid Alternatives is one of the leading national nonprofits dedicated to installing solar, making solar accessible to all types of people. We have several different offices across the country, and yes, even across the world, including installments in Nicaragua and Mexico. And really what we prioritize in our organization is it's people-centered when we think of solar. And we really try to make it equitable in design. And we have several different program offerings that also kind of trickle down into how Tribal Energy Alternatives is set up. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So Tribal Energy Alternatives is a new launch, a new chapter of Grid Alternatives. People oftentimes have questions about what is an affiliate office? What does it mean? Are you still Grid Alternatives? Essentially, to make it short, you can picture Grid Alternatives as an umbrella company, an umbrella organization, and Tribal Energy Alternatives. We share the same mission and values as Grid Alternatives, but we serve a different niche or need of a community that we've been serving for the past 5 or 6 years now at Grid Alternatives. And now we've just evolved into this native-led organization. So Tribal Energy Alternatives, we also really value renewable energy as a means to furthering tribal sovereignty and energy sovereignty across Indian country. We began, just as a little background and story, we began as just a tribal program, like a program offering of Grid Alternatives to work directly with tribes to get them solar in their communities, to get them solar on their facility buildings, to get them solar on their government buildings. And as we got to grow as that program, we began to see the need of, okay, we need to have our separate affiliate status because we represent just a different type of solar need across the country that isn't met. So a really unique thing about Tribal Energy Alternatives is our vision and mission is entirely dedicated to energy sovereignty for tribal nations. Where Grid Alternatives gets to branch out and serve different types of communities in need, our focus and our strength is working directly with tribal nations. And again, we see that through building community-powered solutions. How I like to describe us is we're from the rooftop to the classroom to, the state assembly room if needed. We really just try to provide wraparound services for a tribe in the form of installation, design, engineering, grants, and workforce development. And that will take us into our next slide. Okay, cool. So a little bit about, again, just our impacts as an organization. We have 5 main pillars that we offer to tribes that we work directly with. We have our grants program, our workforce development program, our construction program, a specifically California resource program, and our policy program, which is the shop that I head. And again, they are all designed to meet tribes where they are and grow opportunities from within. So as of tribal energy alternatives being around, we've been able to re-grant $19 million in funding awards directly to tribes. That goes from anywhere of filling gaps in any like state energy grant program or federal grant program that they're applying for. It goes towards building capacity, and then it also goes directly to project design and installation. So we've worked in 19 states to date. I myself have worked in 8 states of those. And how our policy approach and strategy is when we make decisions about what types of states to plug into, it's directly driven by the tribal members that we serve. So we serve a lot of Western states, as you can see highlighted by this map. And I've been able to work alongside policymakers to get more considerations for tribes at state level arenas in Washington, in California, in New Mexico, and in Colorado. Those tend to be higher concentration spots where we focus our policy at. Just to name a few, because I just talked to my team this morning and I told them about this webinar, and I really wanted to get some like snapshots of like maybe example projects that we're working on, because you might hear all these like workforce development, direct construction. What does that actually mean? Like, what is this organization exactly doing? So for example, like one of our workforce training projects that we have is in Portland, the city of Portland in Oregon. We were able to secure a Portland Clean Energy Fund that funds community-led projects, including rooftop solar, but specifically workforce training. And we're right now recruiting tribal members local to the Portland area to go through our Installations Basic 120 program. And our trainees, they have the option to enroll at Clackamas Community College, and they have the opportunity to pursue a 6-month energy certificate or associate's program with tuition completely funded. And in the coming years, what we can expect from this example of our workforce training funding is that we will begin rooftop installation on local tribal members' houses in the nearby Portland area. So that's one really beautiful example of our workforce training program that we have. I'll talk a little bit and brag about our construction team, which is our bread and butter. A lot of focus and interest of working with our construction team, because our construction team is tribal led. So the folks that you get coming into a tribal community are all tribal members themselves. Our kind of tribal workforce training program feeds our construction team. We like to hire from the folks that we've trained previously, because we're trying to create, that good job economy, that circuit. And so we're very, tight-knit construction team. And to date, as of this 2025 year, we've installed over 576 kW of solar, which will equate to about $77,000 of savings in just year 1 of solar production. And over the lifetime of these systems, we're looking at about $2.3 million in savings for tribal members. And again, so this is just our 2025 numbers. We did 66 projects in 6 different communities, 6 community buildings, and over 60 residences. So I am just throwing out those numbers to just kind of level set with you all that we are very serious when it comes to renewable energy systems for tribal communities. And more so than that, we recognize that construction, installation, workforce development. These are all ecosystems that are closely tied to rulemaking and policy setting, which is maybe more of the place that you all are coming to today. Maybe you're not a solar developer, but you're a state energy office representative. And we care about every step of the process to make solar accessible for tribes. So we'll go ahead and you flip past our policy priorities. So I just want to talk a little bit about exactly how do we make policy decisions, and where are our interests? Where do they lie? And so these three policy priorities have come at I've stood up the policy program at Tribal Energy Alternatives now for the past 2 years, which means that I've got to have a lot of conversations with our tribal partners, with our construction crew, with previous and present workforce trainees about what type of policy changes do we see really impacting tribal members the most. What are the issues that the folks that we work with in community care about? And the first and foremost is energy affordability. And that has driven our program to take on tracking and monitoring policy where it will directly translate into more direct savings on a tribal member's bill, more grant programs. We're really concerned about accessibility and that as a main outcome of policy. And then the second one that is kind of linked to our overall priority of affordability is finding more ways that tribal set-asides, specific tribal funding programs are available across different states and federal government programs that we work directly with. And then the third one, which is one of my like favorite priorities that we've identified, is directly plugging our tribal partners into the decision-making and regulatory processes that we're a part of. So I almost play like the double translator when it comes to getting, decisions or legislation that might start or end new programs. I get to talk to lawmakers, to commissioners about the impacts that the program will have in Indian country. And then I get to go back to tribes and talk to them about why they might have interest or care towards this program and why it's important to them. And it's really a huge privilege to be in this role. So we can go to the next slide. So I am given Tribal Energy Alternatives, you know who we are. Now I want to talk more about the nitty-gritty policy trends that I'm noticing in my tenure here at Tribal Energy Alternatives. We're seeing a clear trend. States are more than ever before trying to consider what equity means to them. And I am seeing this more in blue-led states, but I anticipate in seeing it across the country of people trying to define equity and what that really means is where are states going to be driving their investment in the next 5 years, 10 years, as more greenhouse gas emission goals are being met, as maybe there's more renewable energy goals being met by the state. It's the state's job to decide which communities get those types of investments. As we see equity, these definitions emerged of who are disadvantaged communities. I'm seeing states rely on these types of definitions and frameworks as a way to also engage tribes. So they're trying to engage low-income communities, and oftentimes tribes get looped into those definitions and looped into those structures of engagement. Right now, this is happening in Colorado in its ongoing equity docket, and some previous dockets that I'll touch more specifically on in a few minutes. Right now, there's a live equity proceeding in Washington where they're trying to define distributive equity. And in California, California is, I would say, leading the way in trying to design equity mandates and also tribal sovereignty mandates to, mirror those or to run in parallel. And so I do want to just, say that equity frameworks are incredibly important. They help, states identify where harm has occurred. And that's like on the record and it's agreed upon by, government officials. And it, helps define where gaps exist and again, where investments should be prioritized. And what I am positing to the State Energy Office folks today is that there is a challenge, especially for tribes, that equity frameworks are most likely geared to engage populations, not sovereign governments. So when equity becomes the only door for tribal participation, it creates risks for ultimately program design. So we'll go to the next slide here. So what I'm calling it to everyone's attention here today is that there is another way to engage and define equity and also to engage tribal nations. I want to emphasize that tribal nations are not stakeholder groups. They are sovereign governments with jurisdiction, governing authority, and decision-making timelines that strongly differ from community-based actors. And again, when tribes are engaged only through equity frameworks, they are treated more like an impacted community, this nice to have, rather than entitled to direct government to government engagement with, say a state entity. And that means also, coming with an entitled, obligation to like financeability of projects. Like there's a gap between understanding tribal governments as a whole, and I believe that if that understanding, if there was more of a tribal framework adopted by state energy offices or separate tribal consultation tracks, or tribal policies put forward, that there would be less confusion among disadvantaged communities, and tribes being swept up into those types of categories. So I guess my last kind of thought here on this slide is I believe in a world where equity dockets, rules, mandates can be made in parallel with that of tribal governance tracks. So we'll go to the next one. Okay, so again, my role in all of this is I monitor and track dockets that I think are of interest to tribes that we've worked with before or we might work with in the future. And I want to talk a little bit about this equity docket that's taking place in Colorado and the opportunity and risk that is present as of right now, since it's an open and live docket, for tribes to be, again, swept up into this interpretation of a disadvantaged community. So to back up, there was a docket that was opened in 2024, 24R-03060. If you're interested, I'm happy to, email you more information about that. But this was a really unique rulemaking at the Colorado Public Utility Commission because it proposed to consider amendments to the commission's electric utility rules to focus on how to address locations of cultural, historic, and tribal significance related to energy infrastructure decisions and siting. So what does that mean? The Colorado Public Utility Commission, for its first time in its history, was trying to decide how tribes should be engaged in long-term energy siting or energy planning. And what ended up happening from that rulemaking of over a year of engagement with the two state-based tribes out there in Colorado that offered several suggestions, recommendations to the Public Utility Commission, requesting early tribal consultation logs to be met, to be brought into any type of convenience of public certificate of convenience public necessity CPCN filings. That basically tribes wanted to be brought in as early as possible to any type of long-term resource planning that utilities were planning in the state of Colorado. And the ALJ looked at this robust log of recommendations from the tribes and ultimately decided not to adopt any rules or any type of formal tribal consultation policy. And this was a hurt, to all of the work that we as advocates were doing alongside of the two tribes, but it also did not end there. So the Colorado Public Utility Commission proceeded to move forward in following up with this general equity docket of where they want to create clear procedures to engaging disadvantaged communities when there are certain procedures that are highlighted that would impact those disadvantaged communities. Anytime a rate goes up, anytime there's long-term resource plans filed. And now there becomes this question of where do tribal governments fit in these definitions? And one of the very clear solutions that the Public Utility Commission in Colorado has, they acknowledge that tribal governments shouldn't be swept into this disadvantaged community definition, that there should be a separate process, is that they are committing to opening up another rulemaking different than that of this, significant sites definition that was back in 2024, but really trying to highlight of what does good tribal engagement and consultation look like, at, say, if they want to be part of, a rate making, rulemaking, if they want to be brought into long-term resource planning, to really explore that more fully, again, to not make that rulemaking that was done in 2024 as the one-off, but to make it living and committed to tribes to adopting rules, rather than the commission, proposing rules that were not, made in collaboration with the tribes in the state. It ended up with this very convoluted rulemaking where no rules were adopted. The Public Utility Commission is saying, wait, we need to do this together with the tribes in Colorado. So again, that is forthcoming. We're expecting to see that within like the next year or so. But I think an example of movement in the right direction of almost this missed opportunity, and now we're being able to make up for like lost time in these past 2 years. We can go to the next slide. Another really great program to highlight, or example again of where policy implementation or policy interpretation really can get mishandled or just need to change at the program design level, is the self-generation incentive program in California. This particular program wasn't always designed with equity in mind, right? So it was like in 2024 where they were able to, adapt the program to include equity provisions. And particularly in March of 2024, the commission aligned the self-generation incentive program with the net billing tariff, which required new SGIP, is the shorthand of the program, applicants to transition to this new net billing tariff, and also enroll in demand response programs. And so this was a huge issue. This program is meant to, fund batteries paired with solar, and it's meant to still deliver bill savings. And there were tribal set asides and allocations in this program. And when tribal applicants got this rule passed down to them, or when it came out at the California Public Utility Commission, there was a lot of nervousness because this new net billing tariff would not deliver the same, amount of savings on their projects, as the previous billing tariff structure was. So basically, where we see real-time tribal advocacy in this situation, trying to correct, the program implementation. They were not consulted on the front end of how, to make this program better for them, or what would MBT, involvement or adoption look like with tribes. That's not part of the question, right? At the California Public Utility Commission, tribal advocates had to get together and request timeline extensions, so that way this new net billing tariff structure wouldn't be triggered midstream during the middle of the program, to be part of these projects that were already underway. So again, the huge risk here was financial risk, right? Of not being able to pencil out these projects when they were given the first value set, and now it changed midway through the program. And ultimately, the commission did recognize that for these near complete tribal projects, that this transition to the net billing tariff would have caused serious financial harm and undermined decisions already made through the tribal governance processes. Because again, you have to think back to, these tribal governments said yes to these projects under one assumption, and now they're being, changed midway through. So the commission made an important adjustment here, which was to remove that net billing tariff transition requirement. And this wasn't necessarily a rejection of equity. It was a recognition that program design must account for real governance realities that tribes face. And it's a critical lesson for state energy offices that implementation details matter just as much as policy intent. So we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so again, what these two examples really show us is that equity frameworks alone cannot carry the full weight of tribal state engagement. And when equity dockets and equity considerations set the rules without any tribal governance lens, then state energy offices ultimately inherit those constraints, right? Even if a state energy office wants to do better in terms of how they're designing the program, they're tied by whatever rulemaking they're handed, whatever piece of legislation they're handed. So if it starts already flawed, or just not as expansive as it could be for tribal governments, or even best case scenario informed by tribal governments, there's real risk for the program to ultimately not be serviceable to tribes. So I think this kind of ties into my next closing slide, which is that, I guess closing thought, is if you all could take away something from this conversation, is that equity should never be the only way that tribes can participate. And some concrete recommendations as a policy, director, as someone who's had to make these recommendations in several different arenas across Western states, is that things that can help mitigate some of these program design risks, or even failures, is that advisory boards, early and actively engaging tribal representatives, and providing updates to different state energy offices on program usage are incredibly helpful. It moves you away from having to do the constant engagement with tribes, right? To be able to have these not singular listening sessions that take place over several, years. And, by that time, tribal governance has maybe reelected new membership or leadership. Um, yeah, I would say that a tribal advisory board goes a great way to be able to provide updates on state energy programs, and also establishing a separate tribal governance policy or track separate from your equity engagement, a commitment to engaging tribes, and not necessarily even recognizing that as part of your equity engagement, because again, this is so distinct from disadvantaged communities. You're engaging a government. So that means that you could recognize different consultation timelines, right? You could have named tribal liaisons with decision authority, with cultural competence coming from the communities or the tribal nations that you serve. And you can have clear documentation of outreach and engagement with tribal governments. So again, I think where I've seen the most success with state energy offices, and I'm excited to pass it off to the California Energy Commission here soon, is when tribes are treated as early on in engagement as possible, and that these separate tribal governance tracks or policies that you could lay out internally for your team provides clarity. It reduces staff ambiguity on what to do, and it also avoids what no program wants to see down the line, which is this retroactive program fixes, because the necessary feedback relationships just weren't there to understand tribal governments. So thank you for listening to me here today, talk about what we've seen across different Western states for tribal state collaboration with state energy offices in mind. So I'll just leave you with that tribal state collaboration works best when it's not improvised, project by project, or treated as a one-off, but it's embedded deeply and structurally into how programs are designed, and how your office, dedicates, policy and energy into tribal engagement as well. So thank you. And with that, I'll pass it off to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So next we have from the California Energy Commission, Sierra Graves and Davina Whitethorn.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Huge thanks to NROC for inviting us here today, and huge thanks to Catherine for starting things off so well. Learned a lot from your presentation. So my name is Sierra Graves, and I serve as the Director of Tribal Affairs and Tribal Liaison at the California Energy Commission. And I'm joined by my CEC colleague and partner in this work, Davina Whitethorn, who serves as the Tribal Engagement Specialist. Later, we're going to be joined by our amazing partner, Heidi, from Blue Lake Rancheria to talk about some of the work they're doing in the energy space. Briefly on the Energy Commission turned 50 in 2025, and one of the areas that we continue to try to grow in is tribal affairs and tribal energy sovereignty. I want to start by saying we don't have it all figured out. I always like to give that disclaimer at the front, but we approach tribal affairs with deference to California Native American tribes and a commitment to continuing to grow in this space. I'm going to start just by setting the landscape, because I know there might be some other states on the call with what the work looks like in California, and give some background information. So California has the second largest Native population in the US and almost 20% of the federally recognized tribes within the United States. In pre-contact, California was one of the most diverse places in North America. Today, California has 109 federally recognized tribes, and more than 60 non-federally recognized tribes maintain on the Native American Heritage Commission list. And I always like to state that in California, we do not have a state recognition process. Next slide, please. As many of you know, California had a past riddled with genocide and displacement of Native peoples and is still working on reconciliation in all areas, including energy. Wanted to highlight that Governor Brown did Executive Order B-10-11, which was some of the early steps towards working better with tribes as a state. That executive order designated tribal liaisons and required consultation. In accordance with that executive order, CEC adopted our consultation policy, as did other state agencies. And more recently, Governor Newsom took this work even further and in 2019 issued an apology through Executive Order N-1519, which stood up the Truth and Healing Council within Secretary Snyder Ashtari's office. Next slide, please. The California Energy Commission has been working to partner with tribes in the clean energy transition policy for several years. And in accordance with the aforementioned Governor Newsom's apology, the California Energy Commission formalized its commitment to California tribes by adopting a resolution committing to support tribal energy sovereignty on March 2nd of 2023. And that was at a joint meeting with tribes, CEC, and CPUC commissioners. This resolution did many things, but one of the most important things that it did was call for CEC to make a policy that would be commission-wide supporting tribal energy sovereignty that could put into action the resolution's commitments. Next slide, please. In March of 2025, the CEC opened an informational proceeding on tribal affairs and tribal energy sovereignty. This proceeding is framed through a co-development lens where tribes can work to identify with us how to better have tribal consultations, support tribal energy sovereignty, how to work with them on energy grants and projects, how to develop methodologies for considering tribal cultural resources in statewide energy planning and not just waiting to that project individual project level, and create tribal energy equity indicators, as well as how the CEC can better support their tribal energy workforce and clean energy economic goals. And so as a part of this effort, this policy development process, the CEC is in the first round of 11 tribal roundtables throughout the state, with the 3 tribal roundtables that have happened so far pictured on the screen. On the top, our first roundtable was hosted in partnership with Tolowa Dini Nation. On the bottom left, our second roundtable was hosted in partnership with the Pechanga Band of Indians. And on the bottom right, our third roundtable was hosted in partnership with Middletown Rancheria. As we move through our next 8 roundtables, we'll then work on drafting some of the deliverables. And we have committed to going out to these 11 regions again to make sure that we got it right in the deliverables based on what they said. Next slide, please. And so all of this work is rooted in the partnerships we have with California Native American tribes. We often overlap on common goals to get to 100% clean energy, and the CEC is committed to supporting tribally led tribal energy sovereignty. And so in these partnerships, we work to ensure we have robust engagement to shape funding programs. That's something that's really important to us as our chair has prioritized funding to California Native American tribes. In addition, in the policy space, we have tribal working groups that work to inform and shape policies and planning. Some examples of this include a tribal working group that we have on ocean energy, as well as a tribal working group we have on Senate Bill 100, which has led to real outcomes. And so on Senate Bill 100, this will include one real tangible outcome, the first ever tribal chapter being included in that report. We also ensure we have early, often, and meaningful consultations, and this includes formal consultations under AB 52, But that also includes informal consultations. It includes consulting under our tribal consultation policy on policies and plans and much more. We've had successes as a result of consultation that just really show how consultation is meaningful. One example of this is a siting project where there was a tribally led solution to lessen the footprint of the project by double stacking the batteries that were going to be deployed on that project. And lastly, and most importantly, we want to have leader-to-leader discussions. Our chair is committed to having these conversations with tribes. So next, I'm going to pass it to Davina to discuss engagement, outreach, and consultation.
Thank you, Sierra. Going to talk about engagement, outreach, and consultation. Consultation is at the core of everything we do to build these partnerships. But in a state with 109 federally recognized tribes and more than 60 non-federally recognized tribes, we also need practical communication tools. We have worked extensively over the years to build a tribal contact list. This list allows us to send newsletters that can start these conversations. This could be inviting tribes to join our advisory body with the tribal seat or sending out invitations to celebrate our annual awards for our Clean Energy Tribal Champion at the Clean Energy Hall of Fame. We continue to build the relationships by going to visit tribes and discussing things from projects we may be permitting under the new opt-in permitting process, policy areas like SB 100, and more. One of the areas we often discuss with tribes is the funding CEC has. With that, I will pass it back to Sierra for the next slide.
Thanks, Tavina. Like Davina said, funding getting to tribes is a priority of our commissioners, and the CEC is working to support tribally led energy sovereignty with the funding that we have available. And so the CEC funds in a variety of areas that you see on the screen, from clean transportation, energy innovation, and microgrids. But following the resolution committing to support tribal energy sovereignty, the CEC began expanding the tribal programs into a variety of new areas. Following this, we saw the first tribal-specific solicitation out of the Clean Transportation Program, which is a $15 million program and was the largest to not require a limited waiver of sovereign immunity or a match share. Additionally, we also saw eligibility expanding in programs, probably most notably in the Energy Conservation Assistance Act. So that's the longest running program at CEC that historically issued low interest loans to local governments. That was expanded to include California Native American tribes, and we have since had 2 tribes utilize that program to deploy clean energy projects on their lands. And most recently, we're also in the process of the first tribal-specific building decarbonization program, which is a $30 million program to decarbonize tribal homes. Pending guideline adoption on January 21st, so fingers crossed, everyone, the program will be a novel one at the CEC in its design. This will be the first program at CEC where every tribe will have the opportunity to receive a base allocation to decarbonize 3 to 5 homes. Next slide, please. And so thanks to our chair for prioritizing funding to tribes. To date, the CEC has funded more than $135 million in partnership with California Native American tribes. Projects range from capacity and participation support to tribally led climate research to EV charging infrastructure to tribal microgrids, with microgrids being the bulk of this funding. Next slide, please. We are honored that our first tribal microgrid is in partnership with Blue Lake Rancheria, and we have more than 35 tribal projects throughout the state, as far north as Blue Lake and as far south as the Viejas microgrid. The CEC is honored to have partnered on 2 of the largest energy grants to a tribe from a state for utility scale microgrids with Viejas and Pesquenta. We know from partnering with tribes on these projects that they can grow that these projects can grow, and this is seeding future energy sovereignty projects. And before we pass it on to one of our amazing partners who's joining us today, Heidi from Blue Lake Rancheria, we want to mention that we fund microgrids at all scales. So I'm going to give one other example. Next slide, please. In addition to the larger utility scale microgrids, the CEC also supports facility scale microgrids that have a big impact. In partnership with Saboba, the CEC funded a microgrid that serves as a backup for their Emergency Operations Center and fire station. We were very excited to partner on this project and are excited that it should be interconnecting soon. Next slide, please. Thank you all for your time. And with that, I'll pass it to our amazing partner, Heidi, to speak about the work at Blue Lake Rancheria.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Zingg.
so much.
That was great. And yes, I'm Heidi Morgwin. I'm the Director of Tribal and Government Affairs for the Blue Lake Rancheria. And we are eternally grateful to the California Energy Commission and Sierra and Davina and to the chair for your partnership in assisting us to innovate in the clean energy space. Next slide, please. Okay, just to give a little bit of context about where we are located. We are located in real Northern California. Many folks think of San Francisco as Northern California, but really on the map, San Francisco is almost kind of in the center of the state. We're about 60 miles south of the Oregon border. And to the right there, you will see a picture of what's called the Humboldt Bay, or in traditional Wiyot language, it's referred to as the Wiggy. And that is home to the projected site of 2 lease areas for offshore wind. So we are located about 13 miles or so east of that location. Next slide, please. All right, so Sierra mentioned briefly about our microgrids. I think she had a similar picture in her slide deck there, but I wanted to let everyone know that Blue Lake Rancheria is well known as a clean energy innovator, and that we are leaders in commissioning the first behind the meter microgrid in California. And for that, the Rancheria received President Obama's Clean Energy Champion Award, something that we're very, very proud of. Next. Okay, so we have actually 4 microgrids at Blue Lake Rancheria. The first of which we received EPIC funding from the California Energy Commission to design and commission it, along with our amazing partners, the Schatz Energy Research Center, which provides the engineering and the control development. Each of our microgrids, they share similar components. They all have solar arrays. They have comprehensive battery storage. We have legacy backup generators, though I need to update the slide because we're now using a state-of-the-art Tier 4 Generac generator, which is a combination of diesel and natural gas. It is the least carbon emitting generator on the market. And they all have very comprehensive software control systems, which essentially tells the battery what and where and when and for how long to send the electrification. Next. And with that, we are working to do what is called a nested or a networked microgrid. And the way that I like to provide an analogy is if you think about a Ukrainian nesting doll. So if we take our largest microgrid, and that's the mama doll, and then you center the remaining 3 inside of that main microgrid, That means you can play around with the electrification. So you could take electrification from 2 microgrids and send it to one location and split out the remaining two and send those each to different locations. You could send the electrification from all 4 microgrids to one location. And why that is important to us is that Blue Lake Rancheria is very well known in part because of our deep resiliency and backup to the grid. We're very well known for emergency services and being an island of support or relief, if you will, in times of desperation. And so, we want to be able to have the max flexibility of moving our electrification across the 100-acre campus as possible to be able to respond potentially to a large-scale event such as a Cascadia subduction zone seismic event. And so this technology where you nest the microgrids into one main microgrid is going to be a demonstration for what we are referring to as the Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty Project, otherwise known as TERRAS, which essentially is we will design the technology and then it'll be implemented across 142 circuit mile of the top 1% worst performing distribution lines in California that is known as the HOOPA 1101 distribution line, which runs through 3 tribal nations, one being the largest tribe in California, the Yurok tribe, and the others being HOOPA, and then just into the tip of the Karuk tribe. And so what we will be doing is providing an alternative to the grid for those communities. And the technology that we design at Blue Lake Rancheria will be deployed in that project. That is subject to some federal funding. We were conditionally awarded funding from the Department of Energy. There's some question currently about whether or not that's going to be funded, but we're pretty optimistic that we will at least be able to fund the demonstration at Blue Lake Rancheria. We've had some philanthropy who's been incredibly generous come, and we're trying very hard to tie pieces together so that we can at least commission the demonstration site. Next slide, please. Okay, so why does all this matter? I mentioned that we are a beacon of light in times of difficulty, and you'll see this photograph. And what I want you to notice actually is all the black. Essentially, this was a photograph of the rancheria on December 20th, 2022, where we experienced a 6.4 earthquake, which was pretty devastating. And in Humboldt County, we have a single source of failure, which is our natural gas line or our natural gas plant. And so PG&E did not want to risk blowing up communities after the seismic event, and so they completely de-energized to make sure that there was no electrification getting to that gas plant. They didn't, want to have a crack in the line, if you'll say. So essentially, the entire county was de-energized, and this happened at about 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a very cold, very dark time of the year. And you'll see all the holiday lights kind of adorning the casino and hotel there. This is a picture taken from Highway 299, which is just above north of the casino. But you can see everything is black around, and that's how the whole county was, with the exception of Blue Lake Rancheria. If you can imagine, we had 2 miles long worth of vehicles trying to get fuel at our fueling station. One, it's just interesting behavior of individuals. People like to have a full tank of gas in their vehicle when there's an emergency. But also folks that had their own personal generators and such were looking to access fuels. One thing that was a surprise to us, or that we weren't expecting, was how many people clamored to us to get ice to preserve their food and cultural items. We transferred the first floor of the hotel, became identified for folks having life-saving medical devices such as home dialysis machines, CPAP machines. Our restaurant was out the door. Um, anyway, so it felt, um, it was devastating what happened. There were some lives that were lost in the region. Certainly, homes fell off their foundations, a lot of damage, but it felt really good to be part of an organization that was really stepping up for our community. And um, since then, we have MOUs with the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, with the Coast Guard, which is in a tsunami zone to be an alternative backup location for them. Um, we are at the base of a valley that heads up into what's called the Trinity Alps, which is very prone to wildfires. And so oftentimes in the summer, you will see folks like CAL FIRE huddle up in our parking lot and engage in their command distribution and then head up the mountain to fight fire. So Blue Lake Rancheria is really proud to be known as a safe haven for folks in their most desperate times. Next slide, please. All right. Our microgrids have served as demonstration sites. We have provided tours to many, many entities and organizations. We've held microgrid consortiums or symposiums. We've invited the California Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission. We've had two delegates from the Japanese public utility system. We have informed 9 tribal microgrids. Sierra mentioned several of them that they've funded, but a lot of that was based on our initial technologies. We've had folks from all over Europe, tribes across America have come to us, various political leaders, scholars. Every year, I host students from Cal Poly Humboldt's engineering program. We have a local community college, College of the Redwoods. I bring in TK through 12th grade students and scaffold the tour so that it's really understandable for them. And I've developed curriculum that can be delivered to preschoolers through college age. We host workshops and conferences and more. One of the things that I'm really pleased to announce is because of our reputational capital, we are going to be launching a microgrid deployment business. So if in particular tribes are interested in deploying microgrids, but they're overwhelmed by the technologies, um, uh, give us a call. And we'll help you scope out the size that you might need, and then we will determine what equipment might be the most suitable and work with you to install and provide maintenance and operations. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to talk just briefly about our relationship with the California Energy Commission. Obviously, it was mentioned by Sierra and myself that we received our initial seed funding of $5 million from CEC to commission the first microgrid that we have. Also, they have been really instrumental in supporting us with our relationship with Pacific Gas and Electric. I mentioned that we are behind the meter microgrid, which means that we have to have a very positive working relationship with the grid operator. They have been able to provide us with a lot of great visibility to other statewide funders and philanthropy. I participate on behalf of the tribe on the Offshore Wind Tribal Working Group that Sierra mentioned. They also provide some capacity building to support and engage in clean energy. Tribes are often have issues of capacity. And so when there's funding to be able to support us to have an important seat at the table, it's always appreciated. And then most recently, as a result of that first $5 million that we received in 2016, we were eligible for some EPIC follow-on funding to be able to support the Terrace project that I was referring to earlier. And so that's partly how we are going to be able to get over the finish line with our portion of that project, is through their incredible support. They also have hosted events such as a California port convening in Long Beach that we were able to participate in. And I just feel like together with BLR and CEC, that we are building a resilient and reliable future. So just wanted to take this moment and share our gratitude. Next slide, please. All right. So also something that I wanted to touch on a little bit is I showed you that picture of the Wiggy, the Humboldt Bay, and I mentioned offshore wind. So with offshore wind comes three components, if you will. There's a heavy lift terminal that will need to be built that will essentially assemble the wind turbines and tow them out to the lease areas. Then you have the offshore wind lease areas where the turbines will be located about 20 miles offshore into the ocean and cabled to the seabed. And then you have transmission lines that will need to be built and supported. And so that's a lot of industry. And if the offshore wind does come to fruition, we know that it's in a state of turmoil right now, but if it does come to fruition, we know that there are a lot of risks associated with that. One of which is that we already in our region have a disproportionate amount of missing and murdered Indigenous people, in particular women. And we're very concerned about man camps kind of accentuating this existing problem that we suffer from up here. And so we want to make sure that developers, when they come in, whether it's offshore wind or not, we want to make sure that they understand the history and the values of our community, that they understand the concerns that we might have about said projects. We want them to understand that tribes are sovereign nations and that they want to enact their tribal self-determination. We want them to understand the history of extraction so that they can minimize future occurrences of that. We want them to recognize that there was forced termination, there was internment camps, that associated with that, there was massacres and disease, that the importance of embedded cultural traditions and resources, that the tribes have been the original environmental stewards, that there are tribal capacity limitations, that there are tribal interests that may extend beyond reservation lands to ceded and unceded territories, and the importance of tribal data sovereignty. And so what we found is that developers associated with offshore wind and other industries don't have a good understanding of that bulleted list that I have there. And there are even more that aren't included on that list. And that oftentimes it becomes the onerous responsibility of the tribes to do the teaching. And there's something very taxing about that. And so we are working, if you don't mind putting it onto the next slide, we are working with the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, another incredible partner. If you're not familiar with them, I very much encourage you to give them a Google. But we are working with them. They have developed a curriculum called the Pathways to Trust. And essentially what this was originally designed for was for contractors who wanted to work on in Indian country. And essentially it's a comprehensive curriculum that folks go through that's fairly generic in terms of regardless of which tribe you might be working with across the United States, the information applies. And so anyhow, a lot of those bullet points that I was talking about are embedded in the curriculum of the Pathways to Trust. And so we are going to be in partnership with the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, offering a comprehensive workshop to anybody that wants to attend. It's going to be an all-day workshop where we go through the Pathways of Trust curriculum, and then it'll finish off with a local panel of tribal representatives that can really talk about it through the local context to kind of bring it home. So I was mentioning that it was originally developed for contractors who wanted to work in Indian country. And so what happens is they go through this curriculum and then they're put on a list essentially saying that they've gone through the curriculum, they're taking the steps. Um, and then following completion of a successful contract and a tribe signing off, then they get put on a preferred provider list. So tribes, as they're determining which contractors to work with, can go to the preferred providers list and look at who already has been vetted, if you will, to be a good partner for tribal nations. So our training isn't necessarily going to be geared towards contractors. We are going to have folks from the state. Even CEC has indicated they might be interested. We're going to have our local universities. We're going to invite the Harbor District and the the offshore wind developers. But it's going to be an event for the state and the region to understand a little bit more about what needs to be considered when working with and for tribes. And with that, I conclude. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with everybody today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to mention a couple resources that we have coming up. So the final webinar is coming up on February 24th, and it will be on government to government best practices, because a tribal to state relationship really is a government to government relationship. We have fantastic speakers that will provide great resources. Then we have two upcoming workshops. One next week here in at the Golden, Colorado campus of NROC. It'll be all day on January 21st, the morning of January 22nd, and then there's a free optional campus tour. And then in the DC area on February 2nd, the afternoon of February 2nd, and the morning of February 3rd. And the second day is co-located with the NASIO Energy Policy Outlook Conference. These are both totally free to register, and we have honorariums to help state staff if you need some support getting to these. Let's turn to questions right now. We only have a couple minutes. There were some that were dropped into the chat, so we'll start with those. Okay. Jenny Singbach had to leave early, but she had some great questions. One is, how did the California PUC make tribal energy sovereignty a priority for the commission leadership?
Um,
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say we can speak to this from CEC, from the California Energy Commission space, and I will say from California Energy Commission, our leaders have been very committed. I think the governor's apology really has kind of spurred spurred that prioritization. And our chair has always been a huge advocate and support of this work because he listened to tribal partners who, said supporting tribal energy sovereignty is what we need.
Agreed. And I'll just add that in regards specifically to the CPUC, there are some commissioners who are very, very tribally aware and make sure that tribes have the information that they need to be able to engage in government to government consultation, to be able to provide comment or input on important decisions that are being made. So having those strong points of access is important.
Great. Thank you, Heidi and Sierra. Another question from Jenny Singbach. How can NYSERDA partner with tribal energy alternatives to explore ways to create tribal-specific set-asides in NYSERDA clean energy programs and budgets?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of NYSERDA's work, and we're super opening to partnering. I think there's some really good programs that NYSERDA could mirror and like demo, like just depending on whatever technology that they want to focus on, microgrids. We recently just stood up a solar program in New Mexico that was like a $20 million kind of pilot fund. You don't need much to demonstrate, investment into these communities. I will note that New York is a very difficult state to work in. A lot of, fraught tribal relations with the state and tribal governments. So that will be a really difficult thing to navigate. But yeah, I'm happy to connect Jenny with you to talk more about maybe getting, some set asides for tribal, pilot programs and what that could look like.
Great. A question for Heidi. When and where will the Blue Lake Rancheria Pathways to Trust training session be held?
Great question. We're actually in the process of kind of winnowing down the calendar. I can tell you that it won't be before February and it won't be after May 20th. I have an intern at Cal Poly Humboldt working with me, and so some of the parameters are around their graduation. So sometime in the spring, we're really trying to track all of the various conferences that tribes might be attending and trying to ensure that we don't have a conflict with any of those. But in terms of where it will be, it'll be at Blue Lake Rancheria. We have an event center and we're anticipating about 200 to 300 participants.
That's
so
amazing.
I will put my email in the chat and you can email me and I'll put you on the list when we get it narrowed down. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Heidi, I would say if you let us know at NROC when it is, we can put it on our website as well. Fantastic. One last question. Heather Rhodes asks, what are some promising approaches for scaling up with tribes towards gigawatt impacts addressing the climate crisis? And that is open for anyone.
I'm really excited for the future of virtual power plants, to create this single dispatchable resource that tribes can deploy to, create more revenue and then to also participate in energy market systems. So yeah, virtual power plants, they're coming.
Other thoughts or answers on that? And Allison Wise did have a question that came through during your presentation, Catherine. I didn't quite understand it. It says California and micro utilities. She put the Sonova denial of regulatory designation by the CPUC. Tribal engagement with this regulatory landscape, is it possible in California?
Yeah, I also had a hard time understanding that question. If it's like tribes, can they operate micro utilities? The answer is yes, technically in theory, but it's not, probably in the tribe's best interest to do so because the CPUC decision pretty much made a huge hurdle for small scale utilities to even enter the market. But in terms of is there just more interest in this micro utility, like multiple, like say even multiple customers on a microgrid, which is, I'm guessing where the question was trying to get at. And what could you do to influence PUC landscape decisions? My guess, it's not been done before, but other than tracking, microgrid development at the PUC and making sure that tribes are participating, commenting where they want to see, they could also always petition to file for a rulemaking or some type of informational docket regarding micro utilities. You know, the CPUC in the Sonova case made it very clear that they don't want to, you know, regulate those small scale utilities, and potentially tribes could say, well, we want to see, you know, more basis for this decision, or we want, you know, more information on this and participate that way. But yeah, just because the CPUC denied it this one time, I mean, if there's a enough of a public, you know, interest in the matter, it might be taken up again.
Okay. And we've reached our time. I do see a couple other questions, so hopefully people can follow up with our speakers. Really appreciate our fantastic speakers, Catherine, Sierra, Davina, Heidi. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be posting both the slides as well as the recording on the NROC website. So look for that. And everyone have a fantastic day and a beginning to your new year. Take care. Bye.